delighted today to have with us my good friend Jenny Kartupelis. And welcome, Jenny. And if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background.
My name's Jenny Kartupelis, and my background has always been writing, really. For many years, I run my own public relations consultancy, and then I shifted my work into the charitable sector and helped to set up an interfaith organisation, helping people of different faiths interact with one another and work together. I met many people, not surprisingly, amongst whom was one of the people who, at that time, this is about 5 years ago, was a trustee of a large charity called the Abbeyfield Society. The Abbeyfield Society runs many hundreds of care homes across the UK and abroad as well, in fact. And I was introduced to them as someone who might undertake a survey on spiritual well-being in their care homes. We designed a survey with a semi-structured questionnaire, which means that part of it is specific questions and part of it is sort of free discussion. And we piloted it in a few of their homes. The idea was to try and find out how people felt about their lives, and then to draw from this conclusions that would be useful to the running of the charity and its future plans.
So thank you for that. So you were commissioned originally by Abbeyfield to write the report that you're referring to. And I know a bit later you'll explain to us how now it's actually turned into a second book. So you were just starting to tell us there about how you went about the research. So let us understand a little bit more about how you went about collecting the background to the report.
Yeah, okay, Joanne. Well, as I say, we started off with a pilot questionnaire, which I tested out in some of the care homes. And what rapidly became obvious was that you can't clearly say to people, how's your spiritual life? That's, for some people, that wouldn't mean a lot. For others, they think you're really asking about their religion. And obviously nowadays, a lot of people don't practice any particular religion. So I adapted what I was doing to try and find out more generally about people's attitude to their life. Did they feel a sense of purpose, of meaning? What helped them to feel more content? What worried them? And when I'm talking about people here, I'm not just talking about the older people who live in the care homes and sheltered housing and so on that's owned by Abbeyfield. I'm talking equally about those people who manage the homes as their housekeepers or managers, whatever title they happen to use, and about all the people who work in those homes as carers and care assistants. So the interviews that I undertook were equally spread between older people, carers, managers, and volunteers, which in itself is quite unusual, to be looking equally at what helps all those different types of people feel happier and more satisfied with life. I undertook about 100 in-depth one-hour surveys, as well as visiting 40 homes, spending time in them, sometimes an overnight stay, more often a full day, always a lunch, lucky me, because they're often very nice lunches, and getting to see the environment, the physical environment in which people were living, as well as talking to them. Those sort of interviews are all about listening. It's very little about me and what I say and what I ask, and very much about what people choose to share with me. They were recorded and later transcribed, and the very fact of sitting with somebody in their own room or living room listening and sharing and recording demands a level of trust, which I was very honoured to have been given by so many people. And I wanted to honour what I'd heard by writing about it in such a way that reflected those voices. Sometimes I believe in the academic world, this is called participative research, because the people you're talking to bring a lot of themselves into it. And also because their answers will help to shape the way that you conduct future surveys. So it's interactive, really. That's the sort of, that perhaps just answers briefly what the actual work of the survey was like.
Yes, thank you. So you obviously gathered an awful lot of material. So how do you go about turning all that research into writing?
I was commissioned to do a report rather than a book, a confidential report to the organisation that would help them develop their own strategy and marketing and future planning. So turning it into a report, as we can say a little bit more about this, was rather different from eventually turning it into a book. But the same principles apply to both. And those are principles of reflecting the voices that you've heard and not losing them in one's own ideas and conclusions. What I did was, having had all this material transcribed, and you can imagine there was an enormous amount of it, I read and reread it and tried to see what themes were emerging. And there were some overarching themes, and then one might say as subcategories of those, there were certain issues that people raised again and again. So the overarching themes appeared to be and are very much about mutual relationships and the model of family, how people build trust and knowledge of each other, and how that trust and knowledge is reflected in how they feel about their lives. The underlying sort of or subcategories of the factors and issues that help build those trusting relationships are much more specific things. For example, what meal times are like, what the environment of the home is like, what time is available for people to interact. So in my report, I broke down into all those categories the conversations that I'd had and picked out from them lots and lots of quotes from people expressing those ideas. Of course, I anonymized them, so it had no names. It would simply say, you know, a resident of a home, a care assistant in a home or whatever, but not naming either the home or the person. And it's amazing how similar a lot of these comments were. And so it became easier and easier to cluster them together under the specific issues that I was talking about. And then to link together those clusters of quotes with a narrative that, of course, I wrote myself to try and help the whole thing to flow. Then as far as the actual report is concerned, there were sections summarising what I'd heard and its implications for the way that the organisation might handle certain things in the future, which were confidential. But also emerging from all this were themes that would apply to any care home, any situation in which older people were sharing a life either in a community or in a residential setting, that I realised could be applied universally. So it seemed a shame not to share that much more widely, which is how the book, as opposed to the report, came about.
I know that, as you say, you're hoping to launch the book in September, and perhaps you can come back later and tell us all about how that went. and how you went about promoting the book. But for now, Jenny Kartupelis, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Joanne. Great pleasure.